Hi everyone, Happy New Year. Welcome to today's session of our webinar series. We're excited to bring back the top performing sessions that were at our Elevate conference in San Diego in October. They were incredibly well received, so we wanted to make sure that everyone could benefit from them. Throughout the session, you can submit your questions to Eric in the chat box and we'll make time for the Q&A at the end. So there still is time to register for the two webinars that are on tomorrow and Thursday. So that's preventing problematic solutions and product roadmap. So you can still register for those. And if you have to miss it, we can send out the recordings afterwards. So thanks for joining us today and I'll get started with Eric. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Kalina. Thanks for the intros and welcome everybody. Um, yeah, so we're just, as Kalina said, we're just doing a repeat of a session that we ran at our Elevate conference just at the end of 2025, we're 2026 now, out in San Diego. The session is called Data In and Data Out, and what we'll be reviewing today is just how to work with data within your system and some tools that we have and features available that allow you to bring data in or export data out of the system. So that's why we just kept the same slides from our Elevate presentation, and I thought it'd be a good time to mention that we do have our 2026 upcoming big conference event happening in May 6th and 7th in Edinburgh in Scotland. That one is called Unite. So for those of you who may not be aware, but we always run an annual big conference um, annually, as I said. We do one in North America, and then we do one in Europe. So this year, we always change the location, much like other conferences and events. And we're basically having that open. And I believe Kleena will put a link and some dates on how you can find out more information on that. But if you're interested and have it in your budget to attend, we'd love to see you there. And like I said, that's in May 6th and 7th in Edinburgh, Scotland. So let's get started. We have a limited time today. So let's just go through a quick agenda. Just did a little welcome there for everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about data as a whole, as an overview, and then we'll get into some working walkthrough sessions on some of the tools that you can use to bring data in and data out throughout the session, and then we'll do some Q&A. But feel free, like Kleena said, if you have some questions, you can put in the chat, and she can interrupt me or ask the questions as we go through. And depending on how detailed we need to be, we can maybe move that towards the end at the QA session, or I can just address it quickly as we walk through the different tools. So why data in, why data out? Why would we do that? So here are just some common use cases in which we want to work with data. Believe it or not, custom fields. We tend to do this during our implementation phase. If you're new to SmartSimple, you might be familiar with this. Rather than manually entering in all the questions and fields that you would have on your forms, we actually can import the data. So if you had a spreadsheet, let's say, with a number of your fields or that you'd want to have on your application form as an example, we can import those in bulk versus having to manually enter them one by one. And that's really what I say there at bulk. It's really dealing with a large amount of information, whether it's 10 records or 100,000 records. Importing and exporting makes that work a little bit easier rather than doing things one by one on a record by record basis. So, some other examples: organization contact details. Maybe you got a new list of your constituents that you deal with. You can bring those easily into the system using tools such as import wizards. Maybe funding, budget information, payment details. Maybe you need to export that and put that into your accounting system or other tools that you would use maybe to release payments to your people that you're funding, for example. So that's another use case for extracting data from the system. One of the big conversations that we've seen over the last few years is analytics and business intelligence, so data lakes. So a lot of people are extracting information from SmartSimple as an example and combining with other data they have from other tools and systems and putting that into a single source where you could run reports, get analytics, and really analyze your data. So there's a need to extract the grant data from SmartSimple and put it into these other tools. And then lastly, just general reporting needs and visualizations. So visualizations is a pretty big topic as well, and that kind of ties into the data lake, business analytics and intelligence section, in that how do we use the data and what information can we gather with the information that we're tracking within the system. So to start, let's focus on getting data in to SmartSimple. So got 4 examples here that I'll be showing you today, which is one is the Autoloader. That gives you a means of loading large amounts of data from a spreadsheet format, let's say, into the system in one shot. Same is true for the import wizard that lets you bring out data from outside the system and just import it in through a wizard format into the system. We have the Excel parser, another way of putting data into the system. And then we have our API, which is a way of connecting to other systems to bring data both back and forth. You'll see APIs also listed on the data out section. So what we're going to do here is just a quick walkthrough, and allow me to my screen. And let's start with autoloaders. So what is an autoloader? So an autoloader is what we call is really just a way to bring in large amounts of data into the system in one shot. So how did I get here today is basically if you're a system administrator, you'll have a gears icon here in the top right corner, and then there's a direct link to autoloaders. And that allows you to go to this screen, which will be a list of all the available autoloaders that you've already created, or you can start from scratch and build a new one. So for the purpose of time saving, I'm going to use one that I've already created, and we're going to bring in some sample grants. So really what you do here is kind of a point and click using the tools that are available to build out your mapping of how you want to bring this data in. So why I'm doing all this is because I actually have a spreadsheet that I want to bring into the system. So here is my sample sheet. I have the data that I want to load into the system. I've saved this as a CSV format, meaning it's a comma separated values. Even though you can work with it in Excel, it's best if you use CSV file formats for your autoloaders. It makes it a little bit easier to work. So in this case, what I've done, I've given my project a name. You can describe it so you can remember why you did this in the past. I've selected the appropriate smart folder of where I want to put the file for it to grab it. And then we get into some of the, what kind of file are we going to work with here? So CSV is probably the most common, easiest to work with. You can just, like I say, open it up in Excel. You just do a simple save as, and CSV is an option for you there. If maybe your IT teams or developers, if you're lucky enough to have access to those resources, they may want to work in JSON or XML format, and that's available as well. For this is pretty much you can leave standard. It defaults to CSV and it defaults to the file encoding. Very rarely do you have to change that, so you can leave those as is. And then at this stage, we want to know or tell the system what do we want to import. So in this case, I want to bring in data to our submission manager, which is tracking our grant applications. And for those of you familiar with our terminology, I want to bring in the level 1 records. And I've turned this on so that it's an active working autoload. For those of you who want to pull data from outside of the system, that's possible as well. You can grab files from SFTP sites, other websites, things like that. You can read them in directly so that instead of manually uploading a file into the system can just grab it from an external source, and then you can run it on a scheduled basis or as a file gets populated. So you have the ability to schedule these as well and automate the process. So the biggest step with the autoloader is really just mapping the fields. So in this case here, I'm telling the system that we have 8 columns and to ignore the first row because that's a header. And then I've told it that we're in a comma delimited value, which is why we chose CSV. And then in here, if I just show you my spreadsheet again, we can grab the columns. So I have title, amount, start end dates, institution status, applicant, and grant type. So I've done the same thing here and mapped it to the appropriate fields in the system. So the key thing for an autoloader is to make sure that you have fields that map identical to the fields you want to bring in from your spreadsheet. The titles don't have to match identical like in this case, but you need to have fields that you want to bring in. In the event that you have some data, maybe I didn't want to bring in the project end date or I don't need it, you can always ignore the fields and it'll skip it. So you don't have to remove it from your file, but rather you can just tell the system to ignore it. And that's it. Once you've entered all the information, you just click Save. We do have two tabs here that are just more for audit perspective. I can see a history of all the autoloaders that have taken place. And then I have the ability to do more advanced things, such as trigger workflows before and after the data comes in. I can trigger formulas, send emails to people to say, hey, this autoloader has complete, or we had a fail. So it just gives you some tracking tools here, some advanced options for you on processing the files. But we're going to not delve into those for the purpose today. It's more for awareness and to explain how we do this type of thing. So for the smart folders, I'm going to go here. And this is, again, through the main menu. I can access the folders through the main menu here. And what I've done ahead of time is created a folder that we pointed the autoloader to say, hey, grab files from here. So what I'm going to do is actually close my sample, and then I'm going to populate it here. So I'm going to browse. I got my sample autoloader CSV, and I'm going to populate the file here. And now the system's going to wait and process it. So what happens at this moment in time is we have a background process within SmartSimple that checks every 5 minutes for things that it has to do. So that same process, we call it GORT. You may have heard us refer to that before, but that process is continuously running in the background, checking for, oh, I got to do something, I got to do something. So now it will be checking for the autoloader to run and process that file. So we'll come back to that in a second, and then we'll focus on our other ways of getting data in, which is quite similar to what we just shown here, but it's more of a manual process. So I'm just going to open up my file again. Just give me a moment here. I'm going to just grab my session. All right. And clean up, if there's any questions, please just, I'm happy to, I'm not actively monitoring the chat, trying to get everything sorted here. So if I go back to my submission manager, so in this case, I just picked the UTA, one of the modules, doesn't matter which one, they all have this ability. In this case, this is our list of active grants, and I want to manually import some into the system. So within your list view, you'll have a button in here that you could bring in export data, bring in data. The one I'm looking at in particular today is the import wizard. This is almost identical to the autoloader, but you get to do it on the fly. So with the autoloaders, you need to set them up, prepare them, point them to a folder, and it'll be expecting a file like it uploaded in 30 seconds ago, and you have to follow that process. With the import wizard, it lets you do it a bit more ad hoc. So I can do the same thing. I can just upload that same file and say, yeah, I want to map it and bring it into the system. But for the purpose of the import wizard, I wanted to show you another way of doing things. So in this case, I can go back to my spreadsheet. And in this case, I can just highlight some information, copy it, and I can just paste it in here. So I can take raw data from any format. Like you saw, I just opened an Excel spreadsheet. I pasted the data into the box, and then I can click next. One of the things I did do here, I don't think I mentioned it, but is I did change it from uploading a file to copy and paste plain text. You can also manually type it in if you want, if if it's only a few rows. But in this case, it's quite easy just to copy and paste from a spreadsheet. So I'm going to go next. Actually, oops, one thing I did forget to do is change this to tab. If you are bringing it in from an Excel spreadsheet, one thing that's very important to remember is Excel treats every column, the separation between columns when you copy and paste into a text box like this as tab. So you can kind of see that here with the headers. There's a bit of space in between. So what Excel does is treat those as tabs. So I do need to tell the system that the delimiter, or what is determining what is one column from the next, is good to be represented by a tab, similar to on your keyboard. So then I go next, and what this allows me to do is kind of preview the data to make sure it understands it. I did say that it's a tab view, and it says, oh, okay, I can understand that. And it's broken out my copy and paste into 8 columns, including the title row, and it gives me a chance to just preview and make sure I got that correct. In this case, I can also tell the system that I want to do 2 things. As I import these records, I can have any template formulas run once it's loaded in, and I can trigger any workflows as well as the records come in. Maybe there's a workflow that needs to run when you enter a new grant in the system, so you can trigger those as well. I'll leave them off for now, just for the purpose of the demo, and then we'll click on next. So we're at this page here, which is, again, really easy. This is where we need to map the fields. One of the cool things you can do is actually have the system try and figure it out. So if I click auto mapping, it can do a pretty good job. If your column headers are identical match to the field names, it does a pretty good job at figuring it out and mapping like to like to make sure that the mapping of the fields are identical. Now, you may have to change it. So this one here, it was, it didn't know what it was. It says I better ignore that one. But I know in our system, it means program. So I'm going to relabel that to map. So when I built the file, I said, no, I wanted to show you that if it doesn't map it, you can manually override it to a particular field, and that's up to you. I also want to toggle this option here to ignore the first line because that's just my column headers. So I don't want to bring those in as a grant type. So when I click next, I get one more chance to just preview everything before I do it. And it says, okay, Eric, you told us to ignore the first line. You've mapped us to the right fields. Am I okay? This is what the data is going to look like. Am I okay to bring it in? And at this stage, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to click next. And it says, done. I imported 14 new records today. And it's easy as that. So if you do have some information that's come in from an external source, maybe you have it in an offline file, then there are methods to bring in the records there. And you can see we have the records that came in that I just uploaded through the import wizard. And if you notice, I didn't fill in these fields on purpose so I could easily identify them here for the demo today. But you can see that happens instantaneously. So when it said it imported the 14, that happens automatically. We'll also see the ones below here happen from the autoloader. So again, I didn't map some of the same fields that we're seeing in our list view. In particular, I didn't have a submission number. So for these ones that came in from that same file, we can see that they all came in here with appropriate statuses, and there was 41 of them, or minus 14, that came in from the autoloader. So in the time that I was showing you the import wizard, the autoloader already kicked in and brought in the information into the system. And you can see here, the dates that I had from the system are today's date, what I use for the start date. So just double validate the information that I brought in. All right. And maybe I'll just pause there before I continue. Kalina, just take a moment to have another sip of coffee. Any questions I can answer at this stage?
Um, yes, we have a few. Can we import only level one, level two fields, or is it also possible to import data for the contact staff section as well?
Yeah, you can do all of that. So each level, the import wizard allows me to import level ones. If I was on the activities tab, I could import level twos. Same thing is if the autoloader works the same way. So I can import organizations, contacts, level one, two, threes, and bring the system in there. Now, the key thing to remember when you're importing um, level twos and threes is they need to link to something. So you have to make sure that you have a field that it knows how to identify which, let's say you're importing a bunch of payments. It needs to know what field can I map it, or what's the grant ID, for example, so that I can put the payments under the right uh, application. So that's something you want to have in your spreadsheet so that when you're loading it, the system says, oh, okay, for this payment, I need to attach it to grant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where you don't need to do that when you're importing level ones or organizations. They just kind of go in. And same is true for contacts. It needs to know what organization should I attach these people to. So just keep that in mind when you're bringing data into the system.
Is the data loaded with the autoloader or import wizard registered in the field history for fields where that is enabled?
Not as it'll show you the if a field was changed, it will denote that. So there's when you're uploading data, there's two things you can do. What I used in my example was net new data, so it didn't exist before. What you can do with the autoloader, this is a good question actually. What you can do with the autoloader is bring in data and map it to an existing record. So again, in that case, when we're in our autoloader screen, we need to identify an identifier. So in this case, what I'd probably want to do is input a ID, right? So I'd want to have my grant ID in here. So we've got call ID, application ID, level one ID, something like that. But it needs an identifier. So and then what it'll do is say, oh, okay, I found that grant, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to replace whatever's in these fields with whatever you loaded. So in that case, you'll see in the history the before and the new value. But if it's a net new record, then no, it doesn't show any history for that. It'll say there's been no changes to the fields. But there is a history here. You'll see that I ran the file today and that I added 27 records on this day and time, and then it completed successfully.
The import wizard doesn't perform duplicate checks. If we wanted to do a duplicate check, would we need to go through an autoloader?
It does not do a duplicate check. So you'd need to make sure you don't have duplicates first. In that sense, in that if you say map it on this ID number, it just says, oh, I found grant ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to attach it. If the first one it finds, it'll attach it there. But it's best to, yeah, it's not going to check for duplicates or do that kind of processing. So you want to make sure your data is clean beforehand.
How do you import files linked, like PDFs files attached to a grant?
So you can do that through a file import, which is a little bit different. If you'd like to know more about that, I'm not going to cover it today. It's a little bit different. But if you want to connect with our team outside, you can either email me after, and we can set up either another session, or if you have premium support, for example, and you have your dedicated support rep, you can feel free to talk to them also, and they can explain to you how to do the file attachment piece. But it is possible.
Perfect. We'll do one more. While importing projects,
Okay.
while importing projects data to the live site, if the contact is already in the RMS, will it send any
Mhm.
notification inadvertently to the contacts automatically?
Yes. So that's why you want to be careful. So any of these options, for example, like the import wizard, um, let me just do something in the fake here. If that's why we have these boxes. You want to be very careful. You want to make sure you know what these are doing, right? So you want to have a good understanding of your workflows and you want to have a good understanding of your formulas. Because if I upload, let's say, 100 grants and I set the status to approved, maybe and I turn this on, maybe you have an approval workflow that notifies the candidate or the grantee that says, yeah, you've been awarded the funding, congratulations, and maybe you didn't want to do that. So there is the potential for import of data to trigger notifications out if you have that set up in your system. So before you start enabling formulas or workflows, which could be very handy, you'll want to make sure you have a good understanding of what they are doing. And the same is true on Autoloader, which is where we have this process tab that I didn't really get into. You'd want to be very clear as to which workflows you want to trigger when you're loading the data and make sure you understand what they're doing to avoid inadvertently notifying. Uh,
Perfect. Do you want me to keep going?
well, those were good questions. I'm just mindful of time. Let me get
Yeah,
through some more stuff and we'll maybe hold some back for the end.
perfect.
And one thing I will say, I know there was a question on the duplicates. You can control through the autoloader, not the wizard, but you can control through the autoloader. You have a little bit more control over how it handles um, creating or updating behavior. So the autoloader has the ability to check to see, does this grant exist or does this payment exist? And if it figures that no, it hasn't, it can go ahead and create it. But if it does find a match, you can tell it to, yeah, go ahead and update the data or just leave it alone. So you have a little bit more control on how it handles uh, existing records through the um, autoloader um, functionality. All right. So let's talk about reports. So there's a few things we can do with our reporting. So in this case, let me go to my sample reports. And this is another way of, oh, sorry, I think I jumped ahead and I'm moving into data out now. Sorry about that, folks. Let me get myself back on track. So we're still dealing with the data in. I'll talk a little bit about the Excel parser and the API, and then we'll move into the data. So the Excel parser, this is a pretty cool tool in which we can work with external data, but in a more controlled manner. So in this case, I have a grant application. I have the fields on this grant application, and in this particular case, I want to deal with a budget. So what we can do, we have a lot of ways to enter budget data into the system. You can do it manually through the use of advanced data table, and you can fill out the fields manually. Or we have the ability to work with Excel, and we call that the Excel parser. So what that allows me to do is work with a predefined Excel spreadsheet. And what that then does is allows me to upload the Excel spreadsheet, much like the autoloader or file import wizard. And what it will do then is actually break out the data and populate um, fields, like in our example here, as a budget. And it essentially is creating an advanced data table, but as level 2 records. So it goes through the Excel spreadsheet and says, oh, I know how to handle that information. And it'll treat it as such and import the data for you like so. So the easiest way to do that is the purpose of today's session is I've already downloaded a sample, and the sample here I have is this. So this is my sample template. So the nice thing about the parser and why we have it, just to define the purpose of this tool, was to deal with budget information where you may have had complex formulas and rules around the data. So what this allows you to do is use software like Microsoft Excel, where you can build out a templated um, sheet with any kind of rules, calculations, logic that you need to build in. Excel is really good for crunching numbers. You can then send this to your grantees. They can fill out the Excel sheet with minimal training. Most people know how to use Excel already. They can fill this all out, and instead of manually entering a budget online in the system, they can do this offline and then just upload the file. So what's in your control is you'd have to build out a structured Excel sheet or template that is ideally locked down. So anyone working in the file can't modify the formulas, but you allow them to enter certain cells that you want them to fill in. And then once they save it, we go back to SmartSimple and we can upload the file. So I'm going to go ahead and upload that same file that I've completed. Okay, and that's it. It's predetermined. It was an Excel sheet that I downloaded a blank copy. I had filled it in manually before the webinar, and now I'm just uploading it. And in the configuration of the field, we dealt with how it understands the Excel file. Okay, so we do have to configure. This does require configuration to handle. But what we can do now at this stage is if I just save my record, refresh the screen, we can see here that the data has come in. So what the system did by uploading the file was it took those line items that were filled in with the dollars and cents and populated it for us here as budget line items, as level twos against the grant application. And then we just did a nice little touch here. We put a display there, apologies. We just did a nice display here so that you can kind of see it in real time, how it processed the information. So that's another cool way of getting data in the system, but maybe not from an administrative point of view, but more for your end users to make it a little bit easier for them to work with. We have some clients maybe taking advantage of this if you're dealing with grantees who may have limited internet access. They might be in rural areas, maybe low-income families who may not have a constant internet connection. This allows the grantee to work offline, fill out an Excel spreadsheet, and when they have a moment to get online, they can just upload the file, and you get the information you want, but you made it a lot easier for constituents to work with the system. So that's a pretty cool feature I wanted to showcase today. Lastly, we have an API. So API stands for Application Programming Interface, and really all it is how two different systems get to talk to each other. So you can also use this to insert information into your system. A most common use case is really things like single sign-on or identity management. So we have clients using this today where they don't want staff to self-register or maintain usernames and passwords, and they populate SmartSimple with the user details through an API call. So that when I log into my desktop in the morning, I don't need to worry about how to log into SmartSimple. I'll get a little shortcut on my desktop maybe, or I go to the browser and it knows how to log me in because that data has been pre-sent to SmartSimple through the use of an API. So in this case, APIs are very handy on working with data coming into the system or out of the system. I'll talk to both at this stage. And it's more of a targeted method. So, exports, data dumps are handy if you're dealing with large amounts of data. This is something maybe more targeted. So we can do things like extracting metadata. So what metadata means is this gives me a list of all the fields on a grant, let's say. Maybe you have other systems you want to work with that you need to have this information for. So you can grab information from SmartSimple on a triggered event. So maybe a status change, maybe I got to click a button, but you can then refer to an API to extract or import data from an internal or external source. So this does require development work on your end from the client. We offer an API for you to use. However, if you do want to build these connections, it's typically under your purview as a client to build these out and then use the tools we provide to connect. So this would be over and above any sort of configuration and would require proper development work to build. But I did want to call it out, showcase it, that we do have a RESTful API that other systems can work with to either get or push data into the system. And the details are available for you here on the wiki, where you can see sample use cases of how to work with the data and how to create these calls or requests, right? And this is true for both importing data and export. Excellent. So now I'll switch over into our data out. So we have a few tools in which we can get data out of the system. The ones I wanted to showcase today are list views, the report builder, workflows API, which I talked about a little bit already, and then another tool we have, which is the archive scheduler. So really, it's right here at your fingertips. So you have the ability to export data from any list in the system, as long as you've enabled that toggle on your list views. So through here, and it is probably the easiest way to extract data in the system. You can run a query. I can come here and say, show me all of the demo records in the system, and now I want to export it. So you can run your search. I can go here, and it's as easy as just clicking a button, and the system will generate a file for me in which I now have access to. But it just does its thing. It just generates the file. I open it up here, and now I have my working data with which I can see everything that I've selected to export. And that doesn't require any configuration. That's just the buttons there. I made my list. It recreates the columns based on my my list view headers here, right? So whatever I have here, it's going to recreate that into an Excel format. That's probably the number one easiest way to extract data from the system. Maybe you've got to prepare for a board meeting, maybe you've got to prepare for a management meeting. With the nice benefit too is that because it's tied into the list view, you can create your own queries or searches or filters to get the data you want and then easily extract it for other purposes. So we can do the same thing through the report builder. So in this case, I'm not going to get into the building of the reports today, but really it allows you to take the data that you may have built in a report format. So I have a disbursement report here, so payments that are outgoing from the system. If I preview that, I can see it on screen. Okay, we've done some formatting, some grouping, where we have some of the different types of grants organized by the different organizations and the payments that are going out in the various stages and summaries. So in this case, what we've done in the report template is allow you to extract the information in two different ways. So I can, the nice thing with this is, which is different than the list view, is it can take that same formatting that we applied in the report builder and pump it into a PDF file. So just as I see it on the screen, I have an exact duplicate of that in PDF format that I can then print out, save locally, send around an email, bring to a meeting that I may need, and it looks the same as it does on screen. The other option is to just dump out the information through a file export like we did with the list view. In this case, it will do the same thing, create a file locally in Excel format that recreates this, and then I can do whatever I want with it once it's in Excel. So that's another couple of easy ways to extract information from the system using our report engine. The nice thing with the reports is, other than the list view, which is very ad hoc on demand, you can actually schedule exports to happen from the reports. So I can generate that same PDF, Excel spreadsheet, maybe in CSV format, and I can have the system say, hey, I want to export this information, and I want you to do it on a scheduled basis. Okay, and this is just like a little wizard. You can say, I want to do a schedule. Maybe I want to do it every day, once a week, whatever you may want to do. Just like setting up a recurring meeting works exactly the same way. For those of you who have more advanced requirements, you can even export this data out to an SFTP site, where another system maybe needs to pick up that file to do something with, and then we can handle all of the encryption and requirements of that nature. But it's a pretty powerful tool in that if you have the same report, you need it for other things, you can build the report once, and then you can operate on a scheduled basis and say, hey, give me the file on the frequency that you need. So it's quite handy in that part. And we do keep a log of any export that has run. If there was any failures or errors, it'll tell you that there. So that's one of the nicer things about the report builder that you can't do in the list view. Another thing that we're able to do through the reports is it works similar to an API, but it isn't an API. It's its own protocol, so to speak, its own way of transferring data, and that's using OData. So OData is just a way of systems to communicate. We didn't invent it. It's just a standard communication device. But a lot of systems support it. Even if I go to my Excel spreadsheet here, I can go to the data tab and I can say get data from external sources. So the nice thing here is if I say from other sources, there's OData feed. It's just built in right into Excel. It's built into other tools like Power BI, Tableau. It just works. It's just there. So what you can do from the SmartSimple side is you build your report, and if you enable the OData connector, you're provided with these links. So you take the link from here and you pop that into the OData feed in the other third-party tool, and then you've just established a connection. The nice thing about the OData is it doesn't need any schedule. Every time, if you did link it to the Excel spreadsheet, like I said, every time you open that Excel spreadsheet, it's grabbing the latest data. So it's not like you have to trigger it. And I believe the other tools, like just Power BI and Tableau, I believe then you're getting a real-time feed on your data visualizations of information that's coming in from SmartSimple. So it's kind of cool in that you can build a report with very distinct fields that you may need and want to report on them, and then you can use the OData connector to the other tools so that maybe you have a person in your office that's Power BI expert. They don't need to worry about where the data is coming from in SmartSimple or knowing how to build a report here. Once you've done that for them and established the link, they just need to open up their visualization tool and go from there. So lastly, just to tie it all together, I talked about the API already. One thing that we do have in here is the workflows. The only thing I want to talk about the workflows in terms of extracting data is that the workflows can trigger these events. So within a workflow, you can have a task that extracts information. So you can say, I want to do a new task, and that task can be connecting to something else. So I could either, generate a PDF. That's a form of getting data out. I could trigger a workflow or a script that then generates an export. I can connect to external sources to say, hey, put this information there. You can trigger API calls. So the workflows can be used in conjunction with everything else that I've talked about in terms of as part of your either data coming in or data coming out of the system. We also have the ability to, and you need to contact us for this, is that if I go back to global settings, you won't see this, only we can see it at SmartSimple. But if you connect with us, we can create, it's similar to creating a backup. So if you need to, whether it's for compliance purposes or you need a copy of all the data in the system, then you're able to, or we're able to do it on your behalf, but create an archive, as we call it, so a data dump, in that you can extract all of the data in the system. And what it will do is just create a daily, weekly, you can schedule it however often you file. A daily is probably overkill, but sometimes people need it every month or every quarter. In that, here's all the data. You can store that somewhere else into an offline backup, and then you have a copy of all your data. And what that does is create a file for each of the tables. So you'd have a file for organizations, you'd have a file for contacts, a file for all friends. So if that has any interest, then please connect with support or your client engagement manager, and we can kind of walk you through how that works. But that's another method of extracting information from the system. But again, that wouldn't be, you wouldn't use it for day-to-day activities. It's more of disaster recovery, or maybe you just need a snapshot of whatever's in the system. I mean, we do that for you. That's part of a software as a service. But you may have your internal compliance requirements where you need to have your own copy. So this is a way that you can do that, but configure it through your own internal systems. So we're at, I think I'm keeping myself on time today. I'll stop here, and maybe any remaining questions or
Yeah,
things
sure.
that we want to do, Lena?
Perfect. Let's see what we can get through. So there's two kind of questions here about the Excel parser. So how
Mhm.
can I add the Excel parser to an application? And then the next question is, can the Excel parser work with a file containing multiple sheets?
I'll answer the second one first. Yes, it can take multiple sheets, and the Excel parser is really um, just pop myself into configuration mode for you guys, and what we're doing here is configuring the Excel parser uh, field. So really, what we've done, it's a file upload field, right? So it's a field type, upload multiple file storage. There's a really good wiki article on this, by the way. Um, and it's a toggle here. So you need to enable it for Excel parsing. And so far, so good. That's the easy part. But this is what you need to configure. So it may look a bit cryptic, but really what it's doing, much like the autoloader, it's just mapping and telling the system what is what. So, oh, what sheet do I go to? Go to sheet one. So if you had multiple sheets, you can say sheet two, three, four, or whatever you name. And then it's just saying what kind of record are we bringing in? It's an activity. What type of activity? It's a budget line. What status should the activity be in? Right. So it really becomes a mapping exercise once you know the format. And it's basically, this is the custom field ID, and on the right hand side is what it is in the Excel spreadsheet. So think of it just like that mapping screen in the autoloader. Here's my field in the spreadsheet. Column one is this, column two is that. We're doing the same thing here, but we have to do it in a code format. But that's all described in the wiki article for the Excel parser. You could do it yourself, or like I said, if you have a service like Premium Support, you can work with your rep to help you build this into the system. But it's all there for you to access and use.
Sometimes some export list view panel review submitted data gives the data in the Excel where the content shifts to populate in wrong columns. Do you have any
Mhm.
suggestions how to avoid this?
When you're using, just to clarify, is it doing the export list,
Export list view.
maybe? Yeah. So when we're doing the export list view, depending on the field type, if maybe something's happening with the field type that's getting confused, like if you're using a rich text field or web page view that has HTML code into it, it could cause some issues. So again, we'd have to, if it's happening consistently and with a particular field type, then I would suggest maybe connecting support team to see if it's something actually wrong, or maybe it's just the content in the field. Um, it might be having trouble dealing with like parsing the information, especially if it's not a standard field that's just containing data. Um, if you're including fields that maybe have like this would not, trying to extract this field. This is just a display field. This will, it could mess things up. You want to be particular about the type of fields that you're want to export, and it should be actual, fields that contain information or data. That isn't like a special field type that might be doing scripting or something.
Reports are limited to 60 columns. Is there a way to export more columns than that?
Not at this time, but we are working on other ways of extracting data. But we're limiting that into the report builder due to performance constraints and things like that.
Okay.
But we are, if you attend our I'll plug John doing our product repeat webinar. If you attend that session, you'll find some interesting things that we're doing that relate to data extraction that we're building into the system.
Okay.
That might circumvent that.
What would your approach be to export data on a very low latency? Example, for building a streamlining export to a database, either micro batch or preferably true event streaming?
Maybe OData, if they support OData, I'd give that a go because it doesn't require any development. And like I said, if OData connectors are kind of built into a lot of software tools now, so that might be an easy approach that doesn't require any actual development or integration per se. Like an API would require you to code something, whereas OData just kind of works. So you can build your report, establish the OData link, pop that into that other tool. I'm not familiar with those, but hopefully it can accept a source, and that might be the easiest way around that. Or, I mean, as always, a file export import. One of the misconceptions people, whenever we say like a file mediated transfer, so that's basically sending a file from one system to another system. People may think it's a bit old school, or why do we have to do it that way? But it's probably the least problematic way of transferring data, and it's so simple. It's I generate a file. Like I said with the reports, you can do that on a schedule basis. You can put a file somewhere, and then the other system can pick it up. And just because it's a file, it doesn't mean it has to be manual. Like I said with the reports, you can schedule it. So it puts a file there every day or every week, and then you can have your other system. Most systems can pull information on a schedule basis. So you just have that other system checking. Oh, I'm going to check today, check tomorrow, and then it can grab it in automatically. So even if we're transferring data through a file transfer process, there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually quite safe, and it's easy, and it works, and you can automate it. So it doesn't mean that if you're using the files that it has to be manual. So again, we can generate files on a scheduled basis, and then you can have your other tools pick up that file on an automated basis as well, so that once it's set up, no one has to click buttons or remember to do it. It can just.
Perfect. I'll finish with a question that's not really related to this webinar, but is there any plans for a webinar on reporting? They're very powerful and difficult to really
Yes.
build them. It'd be great to see a webinar on this.
Yeah, so we plan,
Yeah.
maybe I'll plug our Unite event. So
Yeah.
we're planning on doing a similar approach, but instead of just this show and tell where I'm giving you an overview, I mean, we're only limited with an hour time slot here, but we want to do some workshops. So the intent is that everyone logs in and we follow along and we build a report together, or we build an autoloader together, and kind of get into the ins and outs. So in addition to, we can always help you with building reports, but a couple of initiatives, again, I'll plug John again on his product roadmap session. We are building some tools into the platform that will make reporting a lot easier, where you don't need to know all the intricacies of how the data is connected to each other. We're kind of going to flatten the data for you. You don't need to know things like SQL statements and the complexities in the report builder there. So there are a number of things in the works. in that we're trying to add some features and functionality into the system that you could then make your life a little bit easier when it comes to reporting and analysis of your data.
Perfect. Okay, folks, I think we'll end there. We're kind of at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for all your time. You will get a copy of recording, which will be sent out to you maybe later today or tomorrow. Don't forget to sign up to the two other webinars in this series, Preventing Problematic Solutions tomorrow with Val,
Mhm.
and the product roadmap then on Thursday with John Fulton and Mark Bridger. So please do sign up for them, and don't forget about Unite in Edinburgh coming
Yeah.
soon. Yeah,
And thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. It was great questions. And
questions.
yeah, really appreciate your attendance today. So
Thank you so
hope
much,
everyone has
folks.
a great day. Thank you.
Bye, folks.
Bye bye.